I'm going to cut this 1997 Jeep Wrangler in half, and here's why. How's it going, everybody? Zach here from Project Keeper Motorsports, and now today I've got a really exciting video for you guys. We're going to be talking about exactly what the plan is for this Jeep. Now, I know in the last video I kind of talked about what I was thinking about doing, and I left it pretty vague, and I didn't really know exactly what parts I was ordering, or I was waiting on parts. So today we're going to cover all of that. We're going to cover the parts that I ordered on Black Friday. Most of them have shown up now, so I'm really excited to get those going, as well as what's going on with the Jeep, where the long-term goal is, and then what we've been doing the last few weeks to get this Jeep ready for that. Now, it may not look like a whole lot has happened, but there's been a whole lot of work that's been done on the front end, figuring stuff out. We've had to design a few parts custom, as well as we're getting ready to cut some other custom parts that are going to help make this build work together exactly how I want it to. It's pretty exciting stuff. So, we're going to jump right into it. Go ahead and grab yourself a snack, something to drink, and enjoy the rest of the video.
Alrighty, so we've jumped over here to my computer setup. So go over it this way is a little bit easier to show you guys what I'm thinking, what kind of parts I've ordered, and things like that. So let's start here, and then we'll jump back over to the garage and tell you guys a little bit about what's going on with the actual build currently. Let me pull up to share my screen here real quickly. Alrighty, so starting out, obviously this is kind of an end goal. I apologize, I'm not an artist. This is all been done in Microsoft Paint, but it'll get the point across and be able to give you guys a little bit better visual understanding of what's going on there. So first we'll just start getting rid of some of this stuff so we can talk about it as we go. So let's start here with the frame, what's changing on the frame. As you guys know from the last video, I am doing a TJ6 build, an LJ conversion, whatever you want to call it. There's a couple key things that are changing with that to get the frame to be able to allow that to happen. First and foremost, let's talk. I'm going to use stars throughout this video because they're really easy to point out where I'm talking about. Front hoop, we'll start with the front and we'll work our way back just because that's kind of the way we're doing the build, so we'll do it that way here. The front hoop is getting built out of 1 3/4 inch 120 wall DOM tubing, just bent up in a radius. Same thing with the rear hoop. Obviously this is straight lines, but we're going to do some kind of DOM hoop in the rear, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that hoop's going to look like here in just a second, but just so you guys can kind of see what it's looking like, this is where we're at kind of for that DOM tube. Now this back half is really where the magic's going to happen with this conversion. I've gone with a moto-built LJ conversion, or LJ back half kit that I'm going to use for this conversion. It should extend the frame about 15 inches, as well as give me a little bit more clearance for up travel in the rear. Really excited to get that done. I think I have a video, maybe I don't, in the rest of it to show you guys the frame sections. If not, I can look at adding that, or you can check it out on their website. It's pretty straightforward, just some box tubing or box style tubing to back half a Jeep and get you more clearance. The front is very boxy in this, but it is just staying the stock front half of the frame. Let's go up later. Let's talk about what's next up here. This is really where the excitement starts to happen beyond the frame, talking about the suspension stuff. Obviously, because I'm switching to an LJ, I have to stretch it a lot and change a couple things in the rear, change some stuff in the front, kind of where the whole project is. So breaking down, obviously, what's changed. First and foremost, I'm going to King coilovers. For those of you who know, I run rock crawler coilovers in the front currently. They've been all right, but I'm looking for a little bit more performance, custom tunability, things like that, and I want to go to a remote reservoir just for the target of this build. I'm going to go to 14-inch King remote reservoir shocks. I'm not sure if I'm going to do IVPs or not yet. I'd like to. They're just more expensive, so it makes it harder to justify. And then with that, let's talk a little bit about what the plan for this Jeep really is. As you can see here, I've got some kind of hydro bumps. These are locked off-road hydro bumps, the 2-inch bumps. I'm really excited to use them. I've heard really great things from my friends that have used them, so I'm excited to use those hydro bumps. They're quite a bit cheaper than the Kings, so if they work really well, then that's a great thing for everybody that watches this. I mean, it's really awesome to get on the phone with them and talk with them about it, figure out what I needed. I had an issue where I ordered the wrong thing, just too big of a bump for me to be able to fit, and they were awesome to work with. Really awesome people, very knowledgeable, so that was really cool. Now, as you notice here, there's a third star on the rear lower link, which is a little funky. It's not perfectly proportioned to what I'm doing, but let's talk about it. So I am going to rear trailing arms. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with trailing arms, basically you move the shock up the lower link, or depending on how you do it, just move the shock further up the travel so that when you're you cycle more wheel travel than you get shock travel. Now, I've talked with a couple shock tuners, and I'll likely be ordering my shocks through AccuTune. I talked to them about it. They've seen a lot of success in the 4800 class of Ultra4, so the solid axle single shock class, running about a 0.8 motion ratio. As they're concerned, for everybody else, you'd be considering about a 1.25. Um, so what that means in beyond just the math terms is for every inch of shock that I travel that I have, the wheel will move 1.25 inches. Either that or the shock is moving 80% of the wheel travel. Now, it can be a little confusing, and there's some really awesome YouTube videos out there. We're not going to get too deep into it here. But basically what that'll allow me to do is out of a 14-inch coilover, should allow me to cycle about 17 and a half, 18 inches of wheel travel, which is really awesome, depending on exactly where it ends up. And that'll give me a lot more travel in the rear, which will be cool in some regards. I've heard some people say that it can, decrease some stability in the rocks, but you do gain a lot of tunability in the desert with that extra wheel travel, and that's kind of the balance that I'm going for with that. So some of you probably are sitting there asking, why trailing arms? Why am I going through the effort to make a trailing arm that has to be more beefy, that has to be tuned differently, that has weird shock packaging, all of these things for a Jeep that's just going to be in the rocks? Well, I've kind of changed what the design philosophy for my Jeep is. I've always really liked the rocks. I've always really liked being in the desert, going off-road, just generally. And with that, I've decided to turn the Jeep more into an Ultra4 inspired rock and desert racer as opposed to just a standalone rock crawler. I want this to be something that can drive on the highway amazingly, something that I can go drive through Johnson Valley and get out to the trails really quickly. And I also want it to be really, really good in the technical rocks. Now, that's asking a lot out of something with a stock frame that's not a tube buggy. And there are going to be limitations to that process. But with that, I thought trailing arms were a really good way to do that. I spent a lot of time talking with people, talking with some awesome Ultra4 drivers that have been super kind to provide me with some insight about things like wobble and all of those really niche things to trailing arms that you might not know if you've never done it before, and I've never done it before. With the front, like I said, I'm going to cycle 14-inch coilovers in the front, which should be pretty good for the front. I'm going to try to get around that 6.5 to 7 inches of up travel, as well as getting, I think it's 20% more is what AccuTune recommends in the rear. Looking at 8 to 9 inches of up travel in the rear at the tire, which will still be around that 7 inches of shock shaft or 6 inches of shock shaft up travel. So I'm super excited to get this going. I am going to have really long rear lower links. They're going to be about 50 inches long, which doesn't sound terrible for trailing arms, but when you look at compared to most LJs or TJs, it does start to get really long. It's not undoable. I am just going to have to sleeve those rear lower links with aluminum, 7075 aluminum, as well as some other things that I've done to kind of mitigate some of those other issues I've talked about with um, trailing arms. The biggest one of which is going to be wobble. For those of you who have not heard of wobble, or I've called it slop in the past, when you have your shock shaft mounted on top of a trailing arm, or even when you've mounted it in line with the two joints, you get this thing where if you're looking at it from the back, your shock will kind of do this, and you can break shock shafts, you can do all sorts of things, and it's really not pleasant for your vehicle. It hurts the efficiency. It's just not a great thing in general. There's a couple options to solve that problem. The most common one when you start talking like trophy trucks and desert trucks, where they're not worried about the underneath the control arm clearance as much, is you drop the shock below the center line of the tube bolt. So if you see over here, if you were to take this shock and say this is the top joint and then this is the center of the bottom, you'd put the shock below that center line, would also help fight that. The other option that's really common, and a lot of guys run uniballs with some kind of Delrin stopper at the frame side. Now that stops it, gives you, instead of having 15 degrees of a typical FK rod end, you get like 8 or 6 or whatever it may be to your specification. I went with the TMR Customs anti-wobble joints. I believe they're 8 degrees of wobble total, side to side, so 4 each direction, which should help a lot, as well as it shouldn't hurt my articulation too much in the grand scheme of things with the FK rod end on the other end. Yeah, so I'm really excited to get this thing rolling, obviously, because it's going to be more tuned to desert and rocks. There's going to be some obstacles I won't be able to crawl. Obviously, transfer case, things like that would help that, but there could be times where I need to hit obstacles a little bit harder, which is just a characteristic of some trailing arm vehicles. I'm super excited to do this. With this, I'm going to be targeting a wheelbase of about 115 inches. Now, those of you that have spent a bunch of time online, you've heard 101, 100, 110, 108, all sorts of things. So why 115? What if I settled on that for? Really, there's no definitive reason to settle on 115. I've heard from friends that have LJs, generate tracer LJs, and other people that have used other brand kits and things like that, that they really like being in that 113 to 115 range. My Jeep before was at 101, and it was just way too short. There were obstacles I'd get up on, and it would unload. Suspension geometry was a part of that, but also the wheelbase was a huge part of that. And I want to hit that 115 because that's what I've heard success from. If I fall at 113 at the end of the day, that's not the end of the world for me. I'm not going to fight for exactly 115. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at with that. So I'm super excited, like I said. So we're going to run King coilovers with air bumps or hydraulic bump stops, call them air bumps. Running my same rock crawler center section with new custom rear links, still single triangulated rear with trailing arms, and it should function really, really well based on my 4-link numbers. Now I don't have them pulled up on this computer, but I was looking at about a anti-squat of about right at 100. We'll see how that falls once I actually start getting brackets in place. It's very hard to do without a fully designed custom chassis where you have center of gravity and all of those things. It's really hard to get accurate numbers. But yeah, so that's kind of the plan for the Jeep overall goal. We're going to build a rock racing inspired LJ, TJ6 LJ. So I'm super excited for that. It should make it a blast to drive. Should perform really, really well. It may not be the perfect technical rock crawler. It may not be the perfect high-speed vehicle because it doesn't have. Apologies, I just got a notification that I'm the only one in the call because that's how I'm recording it. So yeah, so that's kind of talking about that. So let's move on. I'm sure this is going to be a pretty long video, so we'll move on to the next step. Let's get rid of these stars. Move on to this piece. Come on, there we go. So obviously with turning it into an LJ, I have to stretch the body. So let's show that up there. A few things that you're going to notice with this, obviously going away from a TJ, I need a cage. There's no avoiding it anymore. I went with the GenRight full cage with an aluminum roof. Reason being is it's trusted, it's been designed. I've seen videos of people rolling them. I've seen people roll with them. They hold up. I trust them. It is more expensive, but sometimes you got to pay for quality, and where can you really put a price on your safety? Now that's easy to say when you already bought it. It is a hard pill to swallow, and I'll be the first to tell you it's expensive, but it is worth it. So I'm super excited to get that in. It should go together pretty smoothly. And not having a tube bender, it's not like I could design one myself, even though I have the skills in SolidWorks to do that. Just not having a tube bender and a tube notcher, it's just too much work for me to be able to do reasonably. So yeah, I'm super excited to get that in. They look great in my opinion. I'll do a couple few things to make it special, some PRP buggy bags and things like that, but pretty excited to do that. And right now I've obviously got it drawn as gray just so you guys can see it, but I'm thinking I'm going to color match that to the rest of the Jeep. Moving on to this body panel. Now that's really the big question when most people do a TJ6. How are you going to do that? I chose to order GenRight has edge fill panels for the top edge of the frame rail where you attach the top. I ordered those from them. I did not order the whole TJ to LJ GenRight kit. Like I said, I was running the moto-built frame. But I'm running those fill panels. Now over those fill panels, which is what this star is going to show here, I'm running moto-built steel corner armor. Really enjoyed my GenRight aluminum corner armor. The price just with everything else pushed me out of the market for it. We'll see how it goes. You know, steel is quite a bit heavier, so we'll see. I don't think it'll be a problem. I want to keep the Jeep pretty rigid. It also helped me get some weight back, which if you've ever looked into like desert racing geometry and things like that, there's some benefits to having weight a little bit further back based on tire impact, tire patch and hitting loops and things like that. It's way too much to get into for this video, but there is some benefit to having a little bit more weight a little bit further back in a vehicle that you want to go fast in. The other star here is this the other big question with the tub itself with stretching to LJ like this. What are you doing about the inner fenders? What are you doing about the inner floor? I'm running Moto-Built's LJ High inner fenders with this. They should do a really good job of putting everything out of the way, giving me more room for up travel, as well as obviously spanning the gap from a TJ to an LJ. And then as far as the floor, I'm going to do a custom piece. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be yet. I'm thinking 1/4 inch steel for a small section of it, but it might be thinner depending on how I reinforce it, things like that. It's all going to get bed lined as well as sound deadened. So there's a couple things there that I need to make sure it's strong enough, but not overdo it so we're adding a bunch of weight. I'm going to keep the moto-built fuel cell in the back, and then obviously do some other things. And then the other big thing that I'm super excited to add is I'm going to be adding Genrite's rear extreme for Highline Extreme 4-inch fenders or something like that. They're aluminum fenders that match my front Highlines that are going to look really good. I think rear fenders are one of those things that make a Jeep look like a Jeep. I've been running it without fenders for a long time, and I think it's fine. But at the point where I'm doing all of this and I have to repaint everything anyway, I'm going to do the fenders. I think they look good. It is something that's not needed, but I think it looks good, so it's worth it to me. With this, I'm also super excited to get rid of the gas fill port right here. So something that's kind of bothered me quite a bit on my current corner armor since I stretched it because I run a fuel cell, but I didn't want to buy new corner armor when I didn't have to the first time. The other thing that's going to be changing, obviously, rock sliders have to get longer. I went with Motobuilt steel rock sliders, same kind of thing. The Genrite mini boat sides are awesome. I've seen people that have cleared rocks because of their high clearance, that extra inch or two of clearance. They're just out of my budget. Couldn't afford them at the time that I've got everything else to do on the Jeep, so I went with the Motobuilt ones. They had a really awesome Black Friday sale. Made it really easy to pick parts over other parts because they were just cheaper and they're still a really high quality part. So let's talk a little bit about something else here. Let me hide these stars. Going up, moving on to the next thing. Now we've kind of gotten out of what's being done to the Jeep. This is going to be stuff that's going to be a little bit later into 2025. I'm going to be running still my Maxxis Razor tires. The ones I have currently are ball, but I've got a really exciting announcement for early 2025. And long story short, I'm going to be running Maxxis Razors again next year. Actually, possibly Creepy Crawlers. I'm not sure exactly which tire I'm going to go with, but we're going to be keeping with that. We're not switching up brand, and I'm super excited. They've been great for me, even with them being old and bald. So no complaints here on those. We're going to see how they do when they're fresh, and I'm super excited to get into that. Let's see. This should be the interior. Let's see here. Oh, yep. All right. So keeping my PRP seats, not switching those out right now. I did order a PRP detachable steering wheel, but this is more just for the looks of the vehicle than too much to talk about modification there. I'm going to probably do a video on installing PRP's universal steering wheel hub, which is pretty exciting. I've never seen, can't find a video on it, so might as well make one when I do it. PRP has been awesome with me, so I'm super excited to get that stuff in there, as well as I said, some buggy bags, an impact bag, some seat covers, like the just generalized all-weather seat covers that you throw on it when you got the top off, things like that. Last big thing on here is obviously the top. What am I doing for a top? Now, I could have gone with an LJ hardtop, but if you're anywhere near where I am, those are really freaking expensive, $2 to $3 to $4 grand, depending on what you want. So I went with the best top Trek top in the Twill, I think is what I ordered. Whatever their nicest quality top is. I talked to a lot of people and they all recommended going with the highest quality one for noise and for durability and things like that. Unfortunately, they don't make one in tan, so I'm switching to a black top. Not a big deal. The top will be off a lot of the time. It's pretty warm here in the summers, so not a big deal, especially with the aluminum roof. It should look pretty cool without a top on, but I will have a best top Trek top, and that fits around the Genrite cage. Does not fit around the fastback cage, otherwise I would have gone with the fastback cage. But so we went with the standard cage so that we could clear that. So it should be pretty exciting. Now, as you can tell, this is kind of, if I were to just stretch my Jeep, this is where it would be at. Couple of different changes and things like that. But overall, I think it's pretty exciting. Now, again, I apologize. This isn't the best of drawings, but I think it pretty well covers what it is, and it makes me excited to see it looking like this. It took a lot of time to get it drawn up like this so I can show you guys kind of what I'm talking about. There's one other thing that I'm kind of messing with the idea of doing, and it's going to be kind of an if I can thing. Not really. It's going to be a for sure thing. Come back down here. See if I can get this here, is running a change in spare tire mount. Now, running 40s, that is going to mean modifying my corner armor, and modifying my tailgate, either doing a custom tailgate or something like that, so that it can fit the wider, obviously, because of the gap. I think is like a 38-inch tailgate gap, so I have to add at least an inch on either end, changing up the latch and things like that. But I want to add a desert-style spare tire. I've run the Genrite tire carrier for almost 4 years now, and it's been great. No complaints with it. Does really well. It does have weight pretty high up on the back, just because the tire sits straight up, but it's been great to me. And if I need to switch back, put that back on, then cool, I'll put it right back on. No complaints here. If I can, I'd love to switch to a desert style tire mount where I can take off my tailgate and put this on for when I want to go run something with a spare tire. I think they look awesome. If you've ever seen, let me look up his Instagram account real quick, just so I don't mispronounce his name. Joey Bickers. If you've ever seen his Instagram, he has a LJ on beams with a spare tire mounted like that. I think it looks awesome. I think it's a really cool look. So it's something I'm going to look at doing. If we can do it, awesome. If not, no harm, no foul for trying. But yeah, that is really the plan for the Jeep. Just really excited to get this going. We're going to jump back into the garage here in just a second and show you guys what's really been going on with the front end, some of the specifics of the actual mechanical assembly of the front end. But yeah, hopefully this gives you guys a really good overview. If you have any questions about any of this stuff, I'm going to try to make videos on most of it as we do it. But obviously, I'm going to miss some stuff trying to focus on getting work done over filming all the time, especially because I'm doing a lot of the filming myself. And YouTube doesn't pay me to do this stuff. So, you know, I don't have the time to do this 24/7. Yeah, I'm super excited to get this going. A couple other things I'd love to do, grill hoop and things like that if I have time as I'm building this. But, you know, wheeling season's coming up quick, so there's a lot of work to get done and not a whole lot of time. Well, yeah, we're going to jump right back into the garage, so I appreciate you guys sticking through this. I know it's a little weird watching a Jeep video and seeing somebody sitting at a desk with a computer screen up, but yeah, appreciate you guys, so let's get back over there.
So moving to talk a little bit about what's changed on the front end. We've done a lot of work up here, like I said. There's been a lot of things we've had to figure out as we go. Some things that didn't really line up how we wanted to, things that were in the way for clearance. It's all really a work in progress to get that up travel I was just talking about. Now, some of the things that really were pretty simple to do that we knew we needed to do. First and foremost, we had to cut the track bar bracket down. Now, as I'll talk about here in a few minutes, I did have to do a custom track bar on this, something I've known I've needed to do for a little while. But with that, the top of the track bar bracket I had originally was too tall. It was contacting the frame at full articulation on this side. Beyond that, I reworked my rear lower shock mounts on the front, as well as we've put these new shock hoops in. Now, I don't know if you can see them exactly where I've got the camera set right now, but I'll show them to you here in just a second. And we're going to be going with Kings, like I said, 14-inch King coilovers. Now, 14-inch King coilovers are a little bit longer than these 14-inch rock crawler coilovers I had in the front before. Now, with that, there's a couple things that we've kind of had to figure out. Making it so the compressed length is the right at full articulation or full bump. Making sure that, you know, we cycle it past what this can extend to because the Kings have a longer extended length. Things like that. On this side, not a whole lot has changed other than obviously we've cut everything off the frame. The fenders have gone back on to check clearances. We've cut a couple brackets. We've got the lower shock mount put in. And then obviously next will be to actually get the bump stops welded in once we figure out some of the other problems. Now I'll talk about those other problems that came up yesterday when we get over to talking to the other side. But yeah, this side's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. Not a whole lot of things that are going to hit the frame. Hopefully, we'll see once we figure out those other things, what's contacting where we're at. But yeah, it's been going really smooth on this side. Not a whole lot of problems other than just getting everything exactly where we wanted, matching the other side with the shock hoop and things like that. So let's jump over to the other side and I can talk about some of the custom parts we've designed, what custom parts we need now, and that problem I was just talking about. So yeah, I'm going to jump right over there. So over here on the driver's side of the vehicle, it may look the same as the passenger side, but for those of you who have built a vehicle like this, you know how different it is and how many more things you have to figure out on this side than the other side. Obviously, there's a lot more over here that can hit things like hitting your frame, hitting your diff cover, things like that. Between the track bar, your steering, all of that you have to figure out. Especially when you want a vehicle to perform like I do with this in the desert and in the rocks. So one of the first things we knew we had to do when we were rebuilding this Jeep from what it used to be was going on to build this custom track bar bracket. Now this track bar bracket is made out of 1/4-inch steel, and I knew I wanted to make a poly bushing. Now I knew I also needed to bring it to the outside of the frame, so I started by designing it in SolidWorks, working off of that SolidWorks model, going off of a poly bushing and DOM tubing to a Heim joint on the other end, and kind of working from there. Now, the reason I wanted to go with a poly bushing was to kind of mitigate some of the vibrations through the chassis, make it a little bit more rigid so we're not getting so much slop in the track bar, and go from there. Now, that went pretty smoothly. We were able to fabricate it here using hand tools, and then obviously some SolidWorks drawings that I was able to mock up. And then from there, we've also done the same thing we did on the other side. We've set up our shock hoops, the upper shock hoops, the lower shock mounts. I'll show you guys a little bit about those here in just a minute. From there, we've kind of started cycling it, figuring out where our ride height is going to be, and going from there. Now, we ran into a problem yesterday while we were doing all of that, and that problem ended up being the steering angle due to the Heim joint. We were maxing out the Heim on the axle side on the far end, and it was causing us to not be able to turn all the way to the left when we were stuffed on that side. Now, breaking down why that happened and figuring out really where we were at, it identified a few other problems. Now, one of the things that is very, very hard to tell from where you're at, but it's a very big problem, is that my tie rod is hitting the pitman arm at full bump right now. That is what's causing my full bump. It's not the lower links on the frame, it's not the axle into the frame, it's not the oil pan, it's not the track bar bracket hitting the diff cover. It is just that the tie rod hits the pitman arm. Now, I kind of noticed that when I started building it, and I was thinking that was going to be roughly where my full bump was, but then looking at it, I realized that I probably have another ½ inch to an inch of up travel I could gain at least, if not more. But in order to do that, I need to build a custom pitman arm. Now, I'll show you guys what we have under here for a pitman arm right now, but that's really what the next step is in figuring out the side and getting everything to cycle clearly is going on. Now, I designed this in SolidWorks, which I will show you guys here in just a second. But then I printed it out. So here's what we've got. We're going to get ready to cut one out of steel. As you can see, it's going to accept a Heim joint as a double shear mount. I'm going to have to cut my old one and do some stuff like that. But yeah, I'll show you guys this model in here. Now, obviously, as you can tell, I have bent, done sheet metal work in SolidWorks to bend 1/4 inch steel plate. And obviously, we're going to be able to weld the old splines from a different pitman arm into this. Now, it's a little bit of a process there for those of you who have looked into welding cast. You understand that we're going to have to preheat it, weld it really hot, make sure it gets a really good bond, some other things that kind of help that bond between mild steel and cast steel. And that should help us a bunch with getting this up travel up. Now, like I was saying, when we're looking at this front end, there's been a lot that we've started to need figuring out. I thought it would go together really quickly, and it's not. We've had a lot of problems with it. That's just the name of the game. So as we get into it, I'll show you guys some of these things up here real quickly, but I'm really happy with where it's at right now. Now, we still have a couple things to figure out, obviously, the pitman arm, but overall, we're looking really, really good for clearance. We're not hitting anything. Once we get the steering stuff figured out, as far as getting full lock when the passenger side is fully stuffed, it should function really, really well with that 6 inches of up travel I was talking about. So let's jump in here. I'll show you guys these shock hoops, what we're kind of thinking with those, the track bar bracket on the Jeep a little bit better, and then obviously that pitman arm that we're looking at doing. So yeah, let's jump right in here. So I brought the light down here to hopefully help you guys see it a little bit better, but starting out, let's go over the shock hoops. These are obviously DOM style shock hoops. This is 1 3/4 inch 120 wall DOM that we bent up and came off the frame with another piece at a 90 to mount it. We've got Moto-Built DIY coilover brackets on the top, as well as Moto-Built DIY coilover brackets on the bottom, as well as this plate that we welded to my lower control arm mount. That's working pretty well. It's cycling pretty clean. Have to make a little bit of an adjustment of where these are tacked at on the tube, just to get the right distance between the shock bolts. Moving on a little bit forward, this is that track bar bracket I was talking to you guys about. It's gone together pretty well. Obviously, you can see here's a poly bushing that is missing half of it. I got to take it back out and hit the other end in. But, yeah, so going on from there, obviously, track bar is custom. It's going to that bracket I showed you got cut on the other side. It is a little at risk of hitting the diff cover under full bump, which is something that is not currently an issue, and I'll talk about that in just a second, but it is something I have to keep watching at as we get a little bit further in this front-end build process. The other thing that has been an issue so far, and I've taken it apart a little bit because we're working to fix it actively, is this pitman arm. Now, this is a stock pitman arm. Thought it would work fine for what I needed to work on, but the issue is we are getting into it with our tie rod at full bump. So that's limiting us by a ½ inch to an inch, if not more, of full bump and up travel from where we're at right now. So what I'm going to is a custom built pitman arm that'll run a double shear mount for the Heim, as well as obviously attach the splines in the same place. And that should help us clear this at full bump a little bit more, obviously, as well as adding a little bit of strength to the heim joint, kind of getting it exactly where we want, helping us with some of the limitations of steering angle that I was seeing under full articulation. That pretty much sums up where this end is at. Obviously, we still have to set the bump stop in here, get the coilovers tuned in to the right length, figure all of that out. But first, the first big step is fixing the pitman arm so that way we can actually see where our full bump falls. From there, I suspect our full bump will be based off of these lower control arms hitting the frame, but we'll have to see what it looks like once we get to that point. Now, turning around here, I'll see if I can show you guys this real quickly. Now, excuse me, this table's a little bit of a mess just because we've been working on it. This is what we've got for the pitman arm bracket. This is scored so it can be bent, as well as scored on that side. And basically what it's going to look like once all those pieces get bent properly and sized is you're going to get something like this. Now, obviously, there's a big hole there. That's where the splines are going to get welded into it. This side is going to receive the heim joint. And yeah, it's going to sit under there and sit. And that's how we're going to do that. So we got a little bit of work to get that to that point. But yeah, that's what I was doing in SolidWorks yesterday because of the problem we ran into. I think that pretty much covers everything we've been able to do on the front end. Obviously, there's a body lift on it now that I don't know if I mentioned in the last video. But beyond that, it's figuring that out, get this front end all articulated cycling, and then we are ready to go with that. So that's where we're at right now. Then it's on to the fun part of chopping up the back end. So, yeah. So that pretty much covers where we're at with this Jeep and what's going on with it. If you guys did enjoy this video, please drop a comment, like the video, share the video, subscribe, share it with a friend, all those, fun, fancy buttons below that we all know so well on social media. If you guys are interested, I am still selling merch, Project Keeper Motorsports merch, at the link in my description. Go check that out. It's on my bonfire. If you guys haven't seen Bonfire before, it's pretty cool for making your own shirt designs and being able to sell those pretty easily. Yeah, appreciate you guys' support. Hope you guys have a happy holidays, Merry Christmas, good New Year's, all of those great things. And I'll see you guys in 2025.